What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to yet another Wheel of Time diary. I know this is getting old at this point, how long I'm taking with the Shadow Rising, but I don't know if I could be doing it too much faster than I currently am. This is, what, the 6th week? Yeah, I think this is the 6th one of these for this book. This week I read for just barely over 5 hours, so pretty much comparable amount to last week. But this time around, I'm not running completely blind. I did actually make notes for the chapters this week. I read chapters 38 through 45, which I think last time I said my goal is to get up to chapter 46, and I am on chapter 46 right now. That's what I'll be reading this weekend. So I pretty much met my goal, and that is all fine and dandy. As for what I felt about what I've read, I really liked it. I wanted a little bit more from what I got in the second chapter that I read this week, because the first one was kind of like an intermediary piece. The rest of it was Perrin's timeline, which was fine. It was actually pretty good. There was some really good stuff in what happened in Perrin's timeline this time around. But I did want a little bit more from, where it was at what I started this week. So let's go ahead and jump into that with the spoiler section. I also happened to forget that I was going to put on the Santa hat at the beginning of this video, so the intro to this doesn't have the hat on. That's all fine. Though I suppose maybe I should redo the thumbnail as such, but probably not. I'll just save that for next week's video instead. Either way, let's go ahead and start off with what I read in, this is the spoiler section now, Chapter 38, which I did say was kind of intermediary in some ways, and that's because it was a few POVs that I'm pretty sure we haven't seen before, not just in this book, but also not in the series up to this point. One of these, okay, that's a lie, actually, come to think. One of them we have seen before, but not under this name technically, and one of them we may have seen before, and I may have forgotten. Either way, Chapter 38 was a really cool intermediary chapter set in Tanchico. In fact, the beginning of this chapter includes a little illustration on the opposite page of, sort of the layout of Tanchico, so that some of the references being made in this actually make a little bit more sense, or a little bit easier to grasp and understand, just kind of inherently, which I really appreciated. The first POV of this chapter had me a little bit confused, but I was finally able to put together partway through that it is a Shanchan POV in Tanchico. I thought the stuff that was going on here was pretty interesting, kind of related back to the brief Shanchan POV stuff we've seen earlier in the book, particularly in chapter 1, I believe it was. But not necessarily a whole lot of actual material to delve into here, just kind of considerations for how the Shanchan are operating in this main bulk of the continent over here, and what's going on and what their sort of motivations are in this part of the world. The next POV was another guy also in Tanchico who is apparently Bors, the man who called himself Bors, as the prologue of the Great Hunt made sure to mention and point out like 50,000 times. So that was pretty cool. Sort of the way that he was thinking and the thought process and everything that was going on in this POV felt vaguely familiar. It was like, this seems like somebody who will recognize when the name is revealed. And when it finally said the man who had called himself Bors or whatever the other character that talks to him is, which happens to be Leandrin of the Black Aja, which is also really cool, comes in and basically calls him Bors. I think that's what happens there. There's an interaction here about servitude to the Dark One and kind of what the plots are here in Tanchico. I mentioned Leandrin. Leandrin was also revealed through this chapter, unless she was revealed in the prologue to the Great Hunt inherently, and I just don't remember that minor detail. She was also part of the audience that witnessed the Dark One, sending his spawn, so to speak, his shadows to search for Rand and Matt and Perrin. So Bors was one of these people. I forget the name that he goes by in this chapter because I only wrote, who is apparently Bors from the Great Hunt prologue. That's all I wrote here. And then Leandrin. Their interactions here are pretty cool. Leandrin's POV as well was pretty hype to me for some reason. I don't know why I liked it as much as I did, but it was enjoyable to get a little bit of insight into that and kind of how she and the other Black Aja are feeling in Tanchico, and kind of the way that these characters are looking out for it. Seems like they're looking out for Elaine and Egwene, or Elaine and Nynaeve, sorry, or some such. Like, they're looking out for something in this area while others are searching for them. So there's kind of this interesting dichotomy there. Chapter 39 was the one chapter of Elaine and Nynaeve material in this section. I wanted a lot more than just this one chapter, but the one chapter was pretty goofy. It was a little bit of a different chapter. I liked it. I thought the pacing was kind of fun, and I thought what it was doing was interesting, even if it didn't necessarily do a whole lot of, pushing this plot line forward, which I would have liked. Again, that probably would have come with an extra couple chapters if I had gotten that. But Elaine got drunk in this chapter, which was very entertaining. There were some altercations between Elaine and Tom, which I thought were fun based off of past Elaine POVs, discussing how she feels like she recognizes Tom and her essentially confronting him about that in her drunkenness, and, really interesting interactions between these characters. I thought it was all really funny. Also, her struggle in recovering the next morning was also pretty entertaining as well. But the rest of this chapter is mostly focused on Nynaeve's brief excursion into Tel'aran'rhiod, because the girls are trying to meet Egwene again somewhere in the dream world, like Egwene promised they would at some point in time, following Egwene's meeting Elaine in the Stone of Tyr, back where she is in Ruidian. Whenever that scene occurred, I think that scene occurred. It was not too long after Matt and Rand went to Ruidian, or it was not too long after they returned. I forget exactly, but that did happen. So I actually went in search on dragonmount.com to actually try to find a little bit on the chapter recap, essentially, of chapter 39 here, to see what it was that actually happened in Tel'aran'rhiod that I forgot, because I have like a brief, sort of mental image, but I actually kind of forgot what it was that I actually read there, because I didn't note it down here. And I actually brings up a lot of other clues here that I did not put together anyway. So what actually happened in there is actually really hype, if this is indeed what happened. Nynaeve looks for Egwene in Tel'aran'rhiod and sees Asmodean. I don't know if that was, meant to be revealed to me, or if that was supposed to be obvious, or if he was even named in the chapter. He might have been, and I just forgot. Trying to enter Ruidian, Bridget warns her off. That was interesting. I do remember that happening. And Nynaeve flees to the Two Rivers. I also remember that happening, where she's nearly killed off by Slayer. I do remember that happening as well. So there's some interesting stuff here that's happening in the dream world. So it seems that Slayer from, Perrin's timeline, where he is in the Two Rivers, isn't just affecting Perrin's timeline, but he's also affecting people, not just wolves, not just animals, but people who entered Tel'aran'rhiod as well. So interesting material there. Moving on, there were several chapters of Perrin's POV that I went through, starting off with a little bit of a slower pace here with these couple of chapters, where chapter 40 and 41 basically just have to do with Perrin being back in the Two Rivers, essentially just as his character, becoming a leader type of figure, and being very conflicted about that. His confliction about this being this leader figure, and also how he feels about the Two Rivers and sort of the people in the Two Rivers and all this kind of stuff, looks at Perrin, in his mind. And this is some of my favorite material from the series, is just Perrin in his mind. I really like this stuff. And then also having a reunion of sorts while exploring around hunting Trollocs, because that's what they're doing at this point. Having a sort of reunion with the same wandering folk that Perrin and Egwene encountered back in Eye of the World. So Perrin already knows this group crazy enough. It was quite enjoyable to see a little bit more interactions here, especially with some of Perrin's changes since that book. Nice to also have a short break here in this enjoyable scene. It was mostly just this little bit of a slower bit of stuff that's happening with information here. Also, at this point, Perrin essentially encourages the wandering folk to come back to the Two Rivers so that they have someplace safe to stay, or someplace safer to stay while there's Trollocs out and about. They say, no, we're going to do our thing. We're just going to continue wandering like we do, in search of the song, yada yada, whatever the wandering folk do. That's what happens. But the rest of the group does return to the Two Rivers to find that there's apparently now a banner flying, basically following after Perrin, which is really neat. So now there's like this leadership banner for Perrin, and similar for Rand being the Dragon Reborn. So maybe not necessarily the same levels of importance as each other, but there's interesting material there, probably a neat dichotomy that could be made between the two characters as such. We also learn in this chapter, chapter 42, a missing leaf, that apparently, even though Loyal put the second waygate leaf thing, the thing that opens the waygate on the outside of the door, means that Trollocs can still kind of get through as long as there was somebody on the real world side of the Waygate to open it. So that's not good. That means that somebody needs to go and actually shut it. They kind of discussed this briefly. But back in town with different character interactions, it basically does come to the point where Perrin collapses from his wounds, or whatever it is that he collapses from. He wakes up to find that Gall and Loyal have actually indeed gone back to the Waygate to close it off for good, or however it is that Loyal intends to do that. But before Perrin can go after them, which he insists on doing despite being heavily wounded, or is it really that he's heavily wounded, or just that he's incapacitated in some sense? I don't remember for certain. I should take a little bit better notes than I currently do, especially since some of the time I don't write these notes until like a day or two later. But, you know, it is what it is. What happens is Trollocs and Fades invade the Two Rivers just at this moment, basically. There's a whole horde of them. They stop them with ease for the most part. And at the very end, the Tinkers also return after having lost some of their folk because of an ambush from Trollocs out there. So there's, you know, an interesting little circle that was made here. Is just like, come back to the Two Rivers, Perrin says. It'll be good for you. He says they don't go back to the Two Rivers, and they are invaded or ambushed by the Trollocs, just as Perrin basically assumed would happen. But now the Tinkers are here in the Two Rivers as well. And in the final chapter that I read this week, chapter 45, The Tinker's Sword, two main important things happen, essentially. Like I said, there was an alarm call that maybe a second wave of Trollocs was coming, but it was just the wandering folk coming back after being, you know, injured. So that was not necessarily very cool. But the first thing that happens is the Tinkers are here, but one of the Tinkers, the son of, I guess, one of the others who is killed in the Trolloc ambush, it seems like might be the case. At least that's how I understood and interpreted it. Picks up a sword, which is blasphemy amongst the wandering folk, essentially rife for disownment. So this kid is literally disowned by his grandmother for picking up a sword with the intention of learning how to use it from Perrin. Some cool little moments here. I wonder if this will be like a relationship that moves forward in the series with Perrin and this kid. I don't know if it will be, but it might be. The kid's named Aaron, by the way. That's the first major thing that happens. The second thing that happens is that the White Cloaks show up now after these Trolloc invasions. And Bornhold wants to kill Perrin on the spot, but Perrin is able to convince the White Cloaks that, hey, look, I'm not doing anything against you right now. I'm just keeping this village safe from Trollocs, and if you leave right now, you're probably going to be killed by the Trollocs on your way back, so you should stay here, which was a very bold move on Perrin's part, but that is something that he did. And now the White Cloaks are going to be staying in the Two Rivers, and this is basically where this storyline ended for now, and this is where I stopped reading for the week. So, recapping, the end of Perrin's storyline at this point basically leaves the Tinkers, what's left of them after a Trolloc ambush, Perrin and co. back and mostly healed or healing from an ambush that they suffered from the Trollocs early on in my reading this week. And the White Cloaks are now all in, not just the Two Rivers, they're in Emmett's Field, I suppose. I suppose I should have clarified that multiple times earlier in the video, but I didn't think to actually. It didn't even come to mind until just now, but that's fine. Like, these are just kind of rambly things. They're not meant to be the highest quality analyses anyway. But now they're all into Two Rivers, and I'm very curious to see how the storyline continues forward, especially considering, you know, Perrin's relationship with the White Cloaks, or rather, you know, very... Yeah, that's basically all I need to say, but that is where I stopped reading for the week. I don't remember entirely sure what it is that I'm supposed to be reading this weekend, but I think where I will be by the time I'm recording another one of these is, at the very least, I'll be up to chapter 52, but I'll probably be to chapter 53, so that is where I'll be. Not entirely sure what's going to go on there, but I do have a few chapters to read this weekend. I've been a little bit more excited to read the last week or so because the material that I've been reading recently has been a little bit better than it was the week before, and especially the week before that, where I've just been kind of unenthused about certain moments throughout. But yeah, that is the state of where I'm at in the Shadow Rising right now. I only have a couple more of these videos to do. There's 2 weeks left, 90 pages to read this weekend, and then like 75 to 80 pages next weekend, and then I'll be done. Then I'll be done with this book, and I'll, you know, catch back up with Fires of Heaven whenever it is that I do that, which probably more on that in the last one of these diary videos, and especially in the review for the book. But that's all for the future. Thank you for watching this rambling mess. If you did, this week was genuinely a really bad rambly mess, so I apologize for that. Somehow last week was better than this week's, or at least it seems like to me. I paused a lot less often last week. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll be back in the next video.